This is like a giga nerf, like get her completely out of the meta. I don't care how you do it, just get her out of the meta, and then you can maybe buff her later on to be like okay, but do not make her the staple of a meta, not ever. In this video, we're gonna be ranking heroes based on whether they should be buffed, nerfed, reworked, or anything in between, talking about balance and what is the best and worst characters right now, before we jump right into the content. But special thanks to the sponsor of this video, GMG. Now as gamers, sometimes we spend 5, 6, 7 hours a day playing games, and it can cause headaches, eye strains, and all sorts of things because of the blue light that is being filtered to our eyes. That's why the GMG performance glasses are the perfect thing to help filter out all the bad blue light from your eyes so that you can have longer game sessions without any of the negative side effects. They can help reduce eye strain, increase your concentration, giving you better sleep and more. Now, personally, with late night gaming and content creation, I love having blue light filter glasses so that I can sleep better at night. Speaking of sleeping better, GMG also offers some sleep gummies that you can check out if you're interested on their website as well. Now, for the next 48 hours, GMG is offering a 25% discount using my code in the links down below. It's also going to be pinned at the top comment. So if you're interested, check it out right now down below. So before we begin, let's break down the categories. We have buffs, just legitimate straight up buffs. Nerfs, you get the picture there. Rework, a character that needs some fundamental changes, or I think they would be better off with some bigger, wider changes than just a pure number or stat increase. Quality of life changes is simply like some bug fix problems or some things that don't necessarily buff or nerf the character, but just make the character feel more fluid and better or more comfortable to play. And then no changes, which is the boring one, but some characters are just not going to get changed. Now, first off is Ashe, and Ashe is a little bit of a tricky one because she is one of the most powerful DPS right now. Even though I don't think that there's anything wrong with her, she's just at the top of the meta, and especially because I'm a fan of like nerfs across the board for the most part. I don't really want us to keep kind of creeping along this power line, right? And even though I think Ashe is fine, I don't want other DPS to kind of rise to make Ashe like the new standard. So I'm going to say nerfs slightly. I think the most recent buffs to the character were not needed, and they could have probably nerfed her slightly or just kept her the same instead. But if any change happens to Ashe, very, very small ones. Now, the next character that we got to talk about is Hammond, and I'm going to say we give Hammond a buff, but in a very specific way. The suggestion I actually saw from Mito is not have enemy player models ruin your momentum. That's what I saw the most, and I think that that would be a good buff for the character. I could also see legitimately just trying to rework Hammond instead and change him up more fundamentally. I think a buff makes the most sense right now, but I could also easily see rework. But if we reworked Hammond, we would probably change a lot more things about him. Definitely want to pass the question off to you down below. How do you feel about Hammond? If they did buff him, how would you want them to buff him in a creative way that didn't make him overpowered? Let me know down below. Next up, we do got to talk about Bastion. Straight up nerf this character, and nerf him a lot too. Like, get him out of here. No, I'm just kidding. We don't have to nerf him a ton, but I don't think that we should be sitting in a Bastion meta. There are certain characters that I don't think is fun to have in the meta. Like, Bastion's a fine character to be niche. He's not a fine character to be played all the time because he takes over lobbies completely. He affects every single player. He creates these really unfun metas that just feel really grindy and non-interactive. I'm gonna put him in the nerf tier. Next up, we do got to talk about Cassidy, and I'm putting Cassidy in the rework tier because they just need a rework grenade, and honestly they need to figure out what the identity around Cassidy is even gonna be, because I feel like they don't understand what they want for the character. They feel like they're buffing his primary, then they're nerfing his primary, then they're changing his nade, then they're, you know, adding more health, taking away more health, adding more health again. Like, what are you doing with this character? It feels very, you know, all over the place. Like, what's the identity? What do you want him to be good at? Just come up with what you want this character to do. What do you want this character to be good at? And then create a character that is good at those things that fits somewhere in the meta. Don't just arbitrarily buff or nerf this character for whatever meta we're in. That's what it always feels like you're doing with this character. Completely rework Magnetic Grenade, in my personal opinion. If you want to make him like a close range damage dealer, maybe, but I feel like he should be like a really, really good 1v1er. Like, you could do that as well. I think there's a couple directions you could go with him. Honestly, I kind of feel like you could give him flashbang back or something that might not full stun, but maybe just like roots a little bit or slows. But yeah, you could also do some more dramatic changes with him. Regardless, they need to rework him, make him a bit better. Doomfist, I actually think Doomfist is fine right now. Yeah, like, yes, we're sitting in some metas that are not the greatest for him, but What he mainly needs is quality of life changes. He needs a lot of bug fixes. He's not the most consistent character right now because of these bug fixes. And while buffs would be okay for the character, I mean, that'd be fine. I think he could be fine with buffs. I think that the game could be fine with Doom buffs. Really, quality of life, all these bug fixes, consistency, and how his abilities interact with people. That's the most important thing on Doomfist, and so I'm going to put him in the quality of life tier. Next up, we got to talk about D.Va, and this could be kind of a lukewarm take. I think no changes. I think D.Va's perfectly fine. You could maybe justify a slight nerf to the character, and she would still be fine. I don't necessarily think that's needed. I think either slight nerfs like Ashe or no changes is where I would put D.Va. Somewhere between there. Doesn't need anything else. No reworks, no buffs, no quality of life, stuff like that. Echo. I also think that Echo is fine with no changes. Don't really think that there's any major thing that you need to do to Echo either. She's just kind of perfectly fine. There'll be a lot of characters in the no changes tier where I think that they are perfectly just fine the way they are. They don't need any major changes at all. Some would be okay if they were slight, but nothing that's really needed. Genji, I know that this might be a little bit of a hot take. I think he needs no changes either. I understand that he's not really that great in this meta, but I think that's more about the meta themselves. And if the other changes that I will suggest on this list go through, Genji would just automatically become better because some of the metas that are, you know, less liked and some of the metas that are countering him a bit more, those metas would kind of fade away. So yeah, I'm putting him in no changes. Hanzo. Hanzo, I'm putting Hanzo in the rework tier. And this one might be a little controversial because some people might just say, just nerf him straight up. Get rid of his one shot, then he's fine. But I don't think he is, because if you get rid of his one shot, he is very inconsistent. There's not really much of a reason to play him versus someone like Ashe or Sojourn. Without his one shot, it's just not even close. Like with this one shot, I think Hanzo's really good and it's comparable. Without his one shot, it's not even remotely close. We don't want to play Hanzo anymore. So what do you do if you remove his one shot? Well, I think what you would have to do is you'd have to give him utility that compromised for the lack of one shot. And if we're giving a lot of power to his one shot, which we are, we need to give him utility that is reflective of removing his one shot, right? Let's just say you remove his one shot on any 200 HP hero, period. Like all of them. Maybe it only does like 150, or maybe even does like 140, so it can't even one-shot a Tracer. That would be really, really bad. But imagine if you did that. But then you gave him like, I don't know, variations on his arrows. Maybe you gave him Sonic, you removed Storm, and you gave him like a couple of different types of arrows. Maybe a fire arrow, maybe a freaking slow arrow. You could do some different kinds of things if you wanted to. Maybe you gave him a completely different type of ability altogether that plays better into his kit, so he's less reliant on necessarily freaking just hitting shots, hitting headshots, hitting dinks. You could even give him some type of close range ability potentially. I mean, at the end of the day, he's still a Shimada. Lore wise, he still could fight hand to hand, so you could give him like some type of, I don't know, bow swing or something like that. I don't exactly know what it would be, but there's a lot of things you could do with the character to take a lot of his power away from the gimmicky aspects of him where you're just spamming and getting dinks, but also make sure that you're compromising for the fact that you are removing a lot of that power, which is something that they didn't do with characters like Hog, with characters like Widowmaker. You have to compromise when you get rid of something that is incredibly powerful. When the one shot is like a huge part of the value they bring, you get rid of that. You have to provide something to the character to make up for those things. So that's kind of what I would do. And I would also think if those abilities are skill shots or skill oriented, then the character would be really, really fun to play because there would be a lot more intricacy to the character. It's a lot less, you know, spam body, and the character would feel less frustrating to play against because you're getting outplayed and you're not just getting randoed in the head. So yeah. Next up, we do gotta talk about Roadhog. And for Roadhog, I'm gonna put him in the rework. We talked about that a lot. Like Roadhog is just a character that really needs some massive reworks, and they're in the works. So it feels like they're finally gonna actually go through with it as of season 7. That's when they said it's coming through. So yeah, I think that they're gonna do something probably with this breather. Maybe they're gonna fundamentally change Hook. We're gonna have to wait and see on that one, but definitely a rework for sure. Similar to why Hanzo I think should be reworked is why Hog's getting reworked. Junker Queen, I'm gonna say no changes. Junkrat, Junkrat's tricky because I think you could actually buff this character. I think you could buff Junkrat. That might be a hot take. I don't even really like Junkrat. Like I really don't like Junkrat, but I definitely think that if you allow characters like Pharah to like rain down, Pharah, Mercy, and like a ton of other characters like Tor being really strong and Bastion being really strong, I would rather have Junkrat be played than those characters. And I think you could probably give Junkrat a little bit. It might not be in his damage. Maybe it's in his uptime of his mines, or maybe it's in his consistency with his minds or something like that, but I think you could give him a tiny buff, just a tiny buff, not to anything too big. But yeah, I think that'd be perfectly fine. May, I think you could probably do no changes on May. You could technically buff her, but I think it's fine to just, you know, keep her the way she is. There are going to be metas that she's really good, but in this current meta, Wall doesn't get as much value as it does in others. So yeah, but still, I think she's fine. No changes. Orisa, nerf. Let's freaking delete this character. And here's the thing I think about Orisa. Orisa should be a character that is fine, but she should never be a character that is great. She should be a character that you could swap to and always like exist and be hard to kill and get some value, but she should never be taking over lobbies and games in the ways that she is. She creates the most unfun environments, in my personal opinion. You're just shooting at a tank that just never dies, or you're just trying to play keep away from a tank that is chasing you down. Like, I don't think anybody likes Orisa meta. Even Orisa mains, even the people that I know that like to play Orisa all the time, they don't want to be mirroring Orisa. They want to be unique in their Orisa play. They don't want to be just grinding it out, and no one else likes to just play these Orisa mirrors. Like, if you like to play the Orisa 1v1, if you like to play Orisa meta, let me know in the comments down below. I'm actually curious your reasoning for liking it, because I haven't met a single person that does. I'm putting her in the nerf, and not like with Ashe, where it's just like a itty bitty nerf. This is like a giga nerf. Like, get her completely out of the meta. I don't care how you do it, just get her out of the meta, and then you can maybe buff her later on to be like okay, but do not make her the staple of a meta. Not ever. Now, the character that we got to talk about next is Pharah, and Pharah's another tricky one, because I honestly think that Pharah Mercy as a duo is something that probably should have never been introduced into Overwatch ever. And that might be a really hot take, but I think it creates so many non-games more than any other combo of characters in the game, and it's not really close, and it always has been. And this is especially true for console players, where consistently dealing with the Pharah Mercy is very difficult. So I think that, like, really she doesn't really need any changes in her current state, but if you wanted to go bigger with how much you were willing to change the game, I think you could probably change up Pharah completely and give her a completely different identity, one that is not connected to Mercy, one that is not connected to that much verticality and that much aerial, you know, mobility. What I'm thinking, where I would like, the direction I would push her if I was really trying to just completely rework her and get rid of like her fly aspect to her, not allow her to take that high of a skybox or whatever, is I would give her some crazy amount of mobility that like allows her to slide. And I would do something kind of similar to like if you've ever played like the old Quakes, right, where you're like able to bunny hop. Like, you could bunny hop around, slide around. You have jets that could push you to the left or right. And so Pharah would be like this rocket jumping, bunny hopping freaking menace around the field. And she has crazy mobility, right? And she could hit direct rockets and fly and shoot the ground and rocket to the left, to the right. And you're just like flying around the map, you know, like it's freaking Quake, but you're hitting these crazy skill shots, but you're not flying really in the skybox. Like, other people could interact with you. Other people could shoot with you. It's a high skill ceiling on the character because you're moving really fast. You have to hit these directs, but you're not flying up vertically. You're like moving around the map, like bunny hopping around the map. I think that would be way fucking cooler than Pharah in her current state. Personally, I think that would be really cool. And the fact that a game that feels like a lot of its like original roots come from something like Quake, but we don't really have a character that plays like a lot of the gameplay of Quake, is interesting to me. And I feel like Pharah could be that character and not a character that feels like a gimmick, which she does at times. I'm not saying you can't be skillful on this character. I'm not saying you can't pop the hell off. And I'm not saying that there aren't competitive games with Pharah in them, because there are, and they're close games with good hit scans on both sides and divas and things that counter, but there's also an equal amount of games that are just like non-games, like nonsense games, because Pharah exists. So that's how I'd envision, or that's the direction I'd push Pharah if it was up to me. But yeah, if you're not going to go that far, if you're not going to do something like that, then you could just keep her the same. Next up, we do got to talk about Kiriko, and I think you could maybe justify like slight nerfs to the character, but you know, honestly, after that the support role passive nerf, I think it's fine. I'm just gonna say no changes. Perfectly fine. Same thing with Ramattra, no changes. I know he's not seeing a lot of play right now relative to what he used to see. That's mainly because these two characters are in the meta, and if you nerf these characters, I think he would kind of rise back to stardom. Reaper, I'm gonna say rework, but not a crazy rework, just maybe a rework to his teleport in particular. What I would say is that while his teleport is a cool ability in look, I would want it to be like immensely faster, if not instantaneous. And I think that would add on a certain amount of momentum to the character, because it's already hard enough to get close range. We don't have to have these like long punishable animations to do it. Like, no other character takes a high ground with such a long punishable animation, and some characters like Genji just get to do it for free. Kiriko gets to do it for free, and we're making Reaper like do it in slow motion where he can get killed while he's doing it. I don't really particularly think that that's fair to the character, a character that's so weak and has a very, very close effective range, to have other types of his kit be equally as weak, right? He should have really, really powerful mobility, really, really powerful fade and intangibility abilities, because his effective range is less than anything else. So you could make those other things really, really strong and he wouldn't be busted. Just maybe weaken his sustain but increase his mobility. Like, don't allow him to like be this tanky unstoppable force, but allow him to be someone that can like go in, and if he hits his shots, he can like quickly get in, quickly duel someone, quickly get out. So I think that would be the direction I'd push him in. So slight reworks is where I would kind of put to Reaper. Otherwise, you could just kind of buff him. Ryan, no changes. I think he's perfectly fine. Zenyatta, after the Discord change, I think he's been better. When we did one of these before, we talked about how I said that he should get a rework because of how his Discord was kind of affecting people, and it was a little bit too powerful putting it on one tank. The Discord is worse than it was before, but I don't think it really fixes the fundamental problem, and I've changed my mind on how I think they should fix it. In my opinion, what they should do is they should just make it so that it affects tanks less. Like, that's it. Just make it so percentage-wise, just kind of how like Sleep Dart works, make it so percentage-wise it just doesn't hurt tanks nearly as bad. So while you can definitely keep it perma on a tank, it's going to be in your best interest to put it on a squishy if that squishy is in a bad position. That's what I would probably do, and that's like the rework I would do most likely. And it wouldn't be a crazy difference. It would just be like maybe a 5-10% reduction, something like that, but I think that would be enough to really push him. And if you wanted to, you could even do something like keep him in the same power level, but reduce how much Discord does to tanks, but then increase how much it does to squishies, right? So you could duel Tracer's better, Genji's better, all these characters better, but you're not capable of spamming and poking tanks as good. It would like be, you know, a give and a take, and I think that would be good because I don't think that Zen is too powerful or anything like that. Objectively, he's just frustrating to play against, and there are certain situations where he feels kind of oppressive, so that's how you would kind of minimize those things. Break, no changes. Mercy. Mercy's another tricky one. Mercy's another really, really tricky one. I understand that there's a very important place for Mercy. Like, there's a really important reason that Mercy kind of exists, right? She's a character that doesn't take traditional mechanical skill. She does take mechanical skill, but just not traditional one. And she's a really, really great character to just have to pick up. Mercy has a very loyal fan base, and Mercy is also a character that is good for the community and building people into the fold for Overwatch. But I would still like it if they maintain some high skill aspects of her. And I know that they have nerfed a lot of her movement techs. I understand that it was a bit frustrating to play against Mercy when she had these crazy movement techs, but I would find a way to still give Mercy a decent amount of value, even if you're not that great at her, like with all of her crazy techs, but also create a path for Mercies that want to take it to the next level to become better and better and better. And I don't think that the solution to that is to like see these crazy Mercies that can fly around and whip around and do all this crazy stuff and say, okay, we're going to just get rid of that entirely. Because then you make Mercy more one-dimensional. So I would say probably rework, but it's tricky with Mercy. I would say I would want to do all these other ones. Mercy would be what I would do last. Because I also think that how good she is and how oppressive she is and where you could push her depends on everyone else, right? Because she can mess with breakpoints and things like that. So I would change everything else, create a system where I'm like, okay, this is good. And then I would go to Mercy and be like, okay, how can we make you fit, make you more fun to play, give you a higher skill ceiling for the people that really want it while still having a good amount of normal baseline value, and then also just make you less frustrating for people playing up against you, specifically like in the DPS duel, right? Because it can be frustrating when it feels like you just can't ever win that duel. So those are the couple of things that I would say for Mercy. Lifeweaver, at this point, I actually think no changes. You could probably continue to buff him a little bit, but the way that he is right now, I think if you buffed him too much more than this, he could become a big problem. And I think that as a heal bot support, very different than the other types of supports, he's fine. I'm just gonna put him here. Moira, another hot take. I'm gonna say no changes on this character. I think she's fine the way she is. Now, I could argue that she should not be able to freaking fade at a coalescence. Like, yeah, but she's right now, she's strong, but she's not one of the strongest supports in the game. There's a lot of strong supports in the game. So if you got rid of it, it wouldn't be the most fair if you didn't like universally hit the other supports too, because like I said, she's just not the strongest right now. Even though in theory, I don't think it's fair for her to be able to take the one ability, the one ultimate where there was like a way to punish her, but only with high burst, a one shot, you know, something really, really deliberate, and then give her mobility on top of that and a way to kind of further make her impossible to kill. So yeah, that's the only thing, but whatever. Lucio's another tricky one where maybe you could rework him to change him up fundamentally to make it so he's less reliant on his team, but I think that that's like a core aspect of the character. I would probably just say no changes. I wouldn't want to mess with Lucio too much, to be honest. Sigma, same thing. Wouldn't want to mess with him too much, to be honest. I also think Sojourn is in a fine place. She's strong. I don't really think that you need to change anything about her. Soldier, same thing. Now, Sombra, I'm putting in the rework tier. I've said this a lot before that I would much rather push Sombra in the direction of a character that can use their abilities to deny plays while they're happening and deny people while they're happening. Like the best example that I got of this in particular is probably like KO from Valorant, where you have abilities where you can kind of like neutralize people on the fly. I think that'd be kind of cool if there was a way for her to not just like sit and viz and hack people. Perma viz, in my opinion, is gimmicky. I think it would be cool to have some way for her to still be able to maybe hack, but maybe it's like a throwable that she throws, and maybe she has multiple ones where she can like see a character using it, she throws like a pretty generous skill shot, and if she hits them, it like cancels their ability, and maybe if they're mid cast, it does some extra effect to them, like I don't know, stuns them temporarily if they're mid cast to something. Genji pops the blade in the middle of the air, and if you're Sombra and you hit this skill shot at him in the middle of the air, it freaking like cancels his ult and stuns him for a second. But it's not something that you could just do for free. It's not a hack that you're just looking in his general direction. It's something that you actually have to hit. Like it's a skill shot, and that's the idea. You create higher outplay potential with her. In addition, you probably increase her mobility by maybe giving her like a translocator that doesn't go far. Like you can't put it somewhere and leave, but it's like 2 translocators that are short range teleporters. That's what I would kind of do. But you can like teleport around a little area, and then you also have these skill shots that can deny and shut down abilities and ultimates, and then you have like a normal gun, and then that's how you like zipping around trying to counter abilities. But there's ways to outplay you, and there's ways for you to outplay people. That's the direction I would push a character like this in. I would not put her in the direction she is, but like if you're not gonna do all these crazy things, I think just like take away in unlimited stealth and then just compromise with some other buff. I think that would be fine, but I would personally bring her a completely different direction, kind of like how I'm bringing Pharah. In fact, I like my Pharah idea so much, I'm putting Pharah in the rework tier. I don't care. Sim, I'm gonna put Sim in the rework tier. I know a lot of Sim players want Sim to just be back to how she was before, and I kind of agree. I understand it's tricky, right? Because the way that she was before allowed her to carry more games and be more flexible in her play style. And right now she's fine because she's in an Orisa meta, but in an open meta, she probably would end up being worse. But the problem was Sim had a really high win rate in low ranks of play because of her turrets. And I think maybe that was just something that people had to learn to kind of play through. But on the other end, maybe it was a little bit too oppressive. So I'm kind of on the fence here, but I think that at the very least, her previous state was better than the current state. So I would probably revert her there and then see if she needs like minor tweaks instead of some dramatic ones. Torb, straight up nerf this character. Just nerf him. He's way too strong in the neutral. Another character that should not be a staple of the meta. He should not be a staple. Like when you have a whole aspect of a character that just does things without you doing anything at all, like without any intervention, he should not have a place in the meta, in my personal opinion. I don't mind him being strong in certain situations, but for him to be the strongest character in the neutral right now, like one of the strongest, yeah, I'm gonna say nerf. Tracer, no changes. I think that's perfectly fine. Widowmaker, rework, actually. If you're gonna make it so her one-shot is less consistent, I would say, I don't know, maybe even weaken her one-shot even more, but then give her some extra utility. The problem is that the difference between her and Ashe is kind of very narrow right now. So you have to find a way to give her an identity, like a bigger identity. And I don't hate potentially one-shots that are earned, but you can't give it to Widow where it's just like unlimited one-shots all the time. I'm not entirely sure exactly how to compromise. The way that I could see it working, right, is give her some better piece of utility than Venom Mine, right? So get rid of Venom Mine, replace it with something a little bit better. Further weaken the range of the one-shot on her rifle, but maybe make it charge up a bit faster or something like that, where she has more shots overall, but they're not doing as much damage. And then when you pop your ultimate on Widow, then you do normal Widow maxed out damage where you can one-shot headshot any squishy in the game. So the ultimate becomes more threatening. Her neutral becomes better because you have higher uptime with your shots, and you have a better ability than Venom Mine. Anything else, there's a lot of other things you can give her, but at the same time, you're just completely getting rid of the one-shot capability or heavily reducing it. So she doesn't one-shot in the neutral, but she does with her ultimate. That would kind of be where I would go with it, but I'm not entirely sure. I haven't figured it out perfectly there. I think there's a couple other ways you could go with her, especially like you could even go complete rework, but yeah, I'm not entirely sure. Ana, think she's fine. Winston, think he's fine. Baptiste, think he's fine. Alari, I actually think Alari's fine. I know that might be a hot take. Some people probably are saying nerf. I think it's a little bit too early to tell. I think she's fine. I really do think she's fine. Zarya, we didn't need these crazy buffs. Like, whatever this nonsense is that's going on right now, we did not need that. So just revert her back. Get us out of an Orisa meta. Get us out of a Bastion meta. Get us out of a Tor meta. And yeah, I know that this is like, the majority of characters are no changes, but this is where I will place the characters for now in the meta. But definitely let me know if you agree or disagree with any of my suggestions in the tier list in the comments down below. And special thanks again to GMG for sponsoring this video. Check them out in the links down below if you want to get your pair of blue light filter glasses so you can protect your eyes and have better gaming sessions. Anyways, thank you so much for coming by, and I'll see y'all next time.